Hello and welcome back to another episode of the First Brick Property Podcast. It's a milestone episode here, episode 30. We're doing something a little bit different today. As it's a milestone episode and we're doing a Q&A episode, we are live on Instagram. So I've never done this before, so bear with me. Let's see how it goes. I should be able to download this recording and upload it to our normal podcast channels. So if you missed this live or if you just don't want to watch me live, it'll go up on our normal podcast channels, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Apple, iTunes, and all the rest. If it's a success and well received, we may do some more of these, raw, unedited, maybe a little bit risky. We'll see how we go. So my name is KM. I'm the director of First Brick Property Buyers Agency. The purpose of the podcast is to bring a casual style show to discuss all things property, with education being the key. Our episodes will range from discussing a variety of topics to having special guests who can share insights into the property world. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned property investor, we believe this show will be able to further your knowledge and really remove any barriers into getting involved in the exciting and fun world of property. So as we mentioned, we are live on Instagram. So if anyone is tuning in and wants to ask a question live, please put it in the comment section and we'll try to get to them. We do have a list of questions that have been sent in, so we will start with these and we'll see how we go. Bear with me as well. Like I mentioned, we've never done a Q&A. Never done an Instagram live, so not really sure how it works. But we'll see how we go. So episode 30, milestone episode. We will do some questions. Just not sure if the sound is coming through apparently. Anyone listening, can you hear us at the moment? Just a thumbs up or something so we can get some feedback. We've got a few people joining in. Are you guys able to hear me at the moment? Anyone listening, can you? Yep. Okay. Thank you, Isabella. Appreciate it. Legend. So we're doing a Q&A episode. First question we've got is from David G. We've had this question a few times, but it's a very nice question. It's a very important question. David G asks, how much money do I need to have in the bank to be able to make a move for an investment property? So David, it's a great question and it's a pretty difficult one to answer straight out because there are so many factors and variables. So the most standard answer that we can give you here is essentially you'll need 20% of the purchase price plus stamp duty, plus your solicitor fees, plus building and pest inspection, plus buyer's agent's fees, plus any other fees on the side. So it depends on the purchase price, and because it's an investment property, you're not receiving any first home buyer concessions. Even if it is your first time to purchase a property, if it's an investment property, it's not considered the first home, and therefore you lose those concessions. So if we look at an example, a $500,000 property in New South Wales, if you need a 20% deposit, you need $100,000 plus stamp duty, which is about $17,500 on a 500 grand property. And so you're looking at 117.5 plus your solicitor fees, plus your building and pest. So you'd probably be looking at 120,000. Now, if this was in Queensland, for example, in Brizzy or somewhere else in Queensland, your stamp duty would be a little bit less, it'd be about 16,000 on the same purchase. So you're still looking around 120,000 to be safe. Now, that's our 80% deposit, so 80% loan, so 20% deposit. Now, most banks will actually allow you to borrow more than 80%. So most banks will surpass the 20%, surpass the 80%, and they'll go up to maybe 90%, which means you'll need a 10% deposit of the purchase price, plus stamp duty again, and all the rest. When it comes to stamp duty, when it comes to borrowing more than 80%, so 90% and you only have a 10% deposit, you will trigger LMI. LMI is lender's mortgage insurance. Now, lender's mortgage insurance is not an insurance that protects you. It's an insurance that protects the bank, and it's something that you have to pay. So the idea of LMI, or lender's mortgage insurance, is that the bank is saying, well, we're giving you 90% and you're only giving us 10%. So we need insurance that you're not going to default. You're not going to have any issues. We need that kind of insurance. So you pay LMI, which is an insurance. Now, LMI is usually capitalized over the life of the loan, which means if it's $10,000, that $10,000 is added on to your 30 years. Onto your loan, and then you're paying it across the 30 years. So you're not paying 10 grand up front, but it is an added cost. But it means a lot of the time that you can enter the market at a much smaller deposit. So if we look at that same $500,000 property in New South Wales, at 10% purchase price, at 10% deposit, you'll only need $50,000 plus stamp duty of 17.5. The stamp duty hasn't changed. So you're looking at $67,500 plus that LMI will go onto your loan. But at that point, you are entering the market much quicker because you're needing a much smaller amount to save up. Certain professions do have LMI concessions. So if you're a doctor or in the medical field, optometrist, physio, dentist, pharmacist, there are banks that will waive LMI because those jobs are considered to be quite secure, good income, and the bank is happy to happy to lend up to 90% without charging you lender's mortgage insurance. Other professions such as accountants, chartered accountants and lawyers may benefit from that as well. So important to speak to your broker if you qualify for having LMI waived, but up to 10% deposit plus some extra costs will get you into the market. Now, how much depends on the purchase price again. So we'll look at a $500,000 example, so that's 50 grand. But we can be looking at investment properties in Brisbane, Queensland, Adelaide, around all of Australia. And some of these properties, 350,000 is usually an entry level property for an investment. So if you're looking at 350, that's 35,000. If that's in Queensland, your stamp duty is about 10 grand. So you're looking at 45,000 there. That's deposit at 10% plus stamp duty of 10 grand. And then you have your solicitor fees, your buyer's agent fees, your building and pest inspection fees. So that's about, we want to add a little bit more money onto that. So I would say at the minimum, you're looking at maybe 60,000 to actually enter. I would say you probably want to have a little bit more, 75 to 80,000 for buffer zones as well, just in case something happens. If you don't have a tenant, whatever happens, there's a storm, insurance isn't settling, whatever issue can occur, you want to have some money left over as well. So 75,000 to 80,000 would be a great point to start and really be comfortable. But really, 35,000 for 350,000 at 10% deposit plus stamp duty 40 to 10 grand 45 plus a little bit more, and you'd be able to get into the market. So maybe around the $60,000 mark, and then a little bit more for buffer zone. So good question, David. Just moving on, just on the same question, Dave, there is something called guarantor loans. So we had Isabella Gali from Sphinx Finance come on the show a couple of weeks ago, and she was speaking about alternative finance and alternative ways of lending. And guarantor loans are one of those. So if you haven't heard that episode, go back and listen to it. But definitely, we'll quickly explain what a guarantor loan is. So a guarantor loan is when you have a family member guarantee your loan and you don't need a deposit. So or you can have a smaller deposit. So there are guarantee loans up to 100%. So usually it's your parents, mum or dad, they've got maybe equity in their property that they own, and they go to the bank, they say, we will guarantee, we'll be a guarantor for you, Dave, on your next purchase. And that can be for the full 20% deposit or 10% or 20% plus stamp duty, whatever it is, whatever the arrangement is with the bank. So you can actually enter into the property market with a very, very minimal amount if you have guarantors as well. But that's we did discuss that, so I won't go over it fully, but we did discuss it on the alternative lending episode a couple episodes back with Isabella Gali. But thank you for the question, David. And again, we've got a couple of listeners. If anyone's listening has a question, feel free to type it in. We do see it here on the side, and we'll get to those. In the meantime, we'll move on to our next question that was sent in. This one was sent in from Gossip Girl. So Gossip Girl, you know who you are. And she asks, how do I become a property mogul? It's a wonderful question. We all want to become property moguls. So it's actually a very good question. So there are two parts to this question, I believe. So the first part is education. So before you become a mogul or expert or powerful person in any sort of industry, you need to educate yourself about the industry. You need to learn about it. You need to know everything about that world, pretty much. So the first part, I would say, is research. Read, learn, ask questions, listen to podcasts, really good podcasts like the one you're listening to now. Read every book that you can get your hands on, read ebooks, whatever it is, research, and ask people who have done it before. That would be the first thing, really understand how the property market works, how cycles work, different strategies, everything about the property world. You want to embrace this, you want to immerse yourself, you want to know everything about it and what's going on. And then part two would be down to strategy. And we'll go through this in a little bit of detail now, I reckon. And we'll say, how do you become a property mogul? So it comes down to strategy. So I'll tackle this from a passive income point of view, because you can become a property developer and become a very, very powerful and wealthy property mogul through development, but that's very active. We're looking at this from a passive income point of view. So strategy of achieving a high level of passive income through property. Most strategies involve purchasing the properties, using equity to fund deposits for more properties, buy more properties, the cycle repeats, and then having pretty much buying, holding forever or for a very long time, and then using the cash from the rent as your living and lifestyle expenses. It becomes your new income. So a lot of people look for the $100,000 mark, $50,000 mark, whatever that number is that people think is enough for them to live off, and they could quit their job. And if you can quit your job and live off $50,000 a year, and that's $50,000 after all expenses, right? It's a bit of money. Then that's what we kind of aim for. If it's $100,000, $200,000, whatever it is, you set your goal, and then we work backwards. But essentially, what the strategy usually is, and the first one is always the hardest, because you actually have to build that deposit that we were speaking about from Dave's question earlier. So you're building that deposit, and that's usually a lot of hours at work, overtime, whatever it is, saving, eating noodles, and not going out, saving your money. Once you get that first property, the first one is definitely the hardest. You get your first property and it starts to increase in value. Obviously, if you've purchased well, if you've purchased poorly, it's not going to increase in value, or may increase in value after a long period of time. But you want to, obviously, let's assume you've purchased well, and after a couple of years, you've built a nice amount of equity. After you build that equity, you now have, you can use that equity and use that equity instead of using savings or cash as a second deposit, and use that equity to buy a second property. And now you've got two properties, and both those properties are increasing in value. And then as those two properties increase in value, you can pull out equity from the second property, and maybe the first property again if you need it, and you can buy a third. And then essentially you can keep going with this until you get to a point where you have enough properties, essentially, that would meet your goal that you set at the start. And what happens here is you're paying down debt now. So that initial phase we call the acquisition phase. We're acquiring new property. So we're acquiring property as quickly as we can, using equity, maybe a deposit if you need to. But usually we try and use equity, and we keep cash in our offset accounts. And I think we do actually have a question on offsets a little bit later, so we'll tackle that one in a bit. And then you pay down debt and you live off the passive income. So $100,000 passive income, for example, for property is usually about $2.5 million in income in paid off property. We work off a percentage of rent plus some holding costs and fees. So we look at your goal, we work backwards, and we see what we need to achieve. Now, you may buy 3 or 4 properties to get there. $2.5 million in this kind of climate is not a lot, especially in Sydney. Sometimes you need more if you're buying lower value properties and lower value assets. Now, you may be holding too many, and you may want to sell one actually that's done quite well, and use that to pay down the debt on the remaining properties. And then that will pay down the debt quickly, and then you're getting the rent roll coming through. Now, there are other ways to do this. So that's one strategy. It depends on the strategy you choose. There is also the high cash flow property strategy, where you're just buying properties with a very high amount of cash flow. And, we call them cash cows. And you go in, you find these properties, high rent, and they pay themselves down from day one. They're putting money in your pocket. You buy a few of these and you hit your goal. Now, the difference between the first two strategy, that strategy and the first strategy, is those properties that are immediately highly positively geared are usually, and not always, because we buy these a lot in different areas, but usually they sacrifice the equity, the capital growth, or they might be in higher risk areas of vacancies. So a lot of fly in, fly out kind of properties. But there are definitely pockets in Australia which we buy a lot in, where we find we're getting a mix of good growth, positive cash flow from day one. And as you pay down the debt on those properties, the cash flow goes up as well. Now, something to consider, very important to consider with, especially speaking about the first strategy, is that property prices these days are much higher than they were 10, 20 years ago, where this strategy was much easier to implement. This strategy still works. We just have to be aware, and we have to be wary of cash flow. Now, you can have all the equity in the world. If you cannot service the debt, the bank's not going to the bank's not going to release that debt. They're not going to release the money. So cash flow is very important. So looking for properties that will eventually become positive, or are already positive and getting good growth out of them as well, or pumping a lot of money into offset accounts, or having high income yourself. It's very important that we're looking at mixing or having a strategy where you will be able to pay down the debt, or be able to service the new debt with the new debt that you're using through the equity. So how do you become a property mogul? First, hire professionals around you to educate yourself, and hire professionals to teach you and to work alongside you, such as your buyer's agents, such as your solicitors, your accountants. All these people are very crucial. The richest and the people in the world, or the people who are moguls in their industries, they're always surrounded by a team of experts as well, who are guiding them on decisions, because they do that on a daily basis, and that's what they do. So you surround yourself with that team, and get educated yourself so you understand what that team is doing, and then choose your strategy wisely. And your strategy can chop and change, right? So the most important thing is knowing what your end goal is, and having a roadmap, and having a clear and defined strategy of how you're going to get there. Now, that strategy can change, and I like the example I heard somewhere else, and I'll shamelessly use it, of the strategy is like a navigation system or Google Maps. I want to get from my home to Bondi Beach. I put it on to Google Maps. It's telling me, it's going to take X amount of time. This is the route you want to take. On the way to our final destination, there may be an accident, there may be roadwork, there may be a few things that come up. And because of that, the route changes and the time changes. And there's a lot of things that can change, but the destination remains the same. So important to sit down, create a strategy from the start, see how we can get from where we are today to where you want to be, and what's the best way to do it. First property will be the hardest, but they become easier as you go and build equity. But you have to have that strategy, because cash flow does become a big problem. What we're finding, a lot of people these days are running into issues of having great equity because they've ridden big booms, but their income isn't allowing them to actually release the equity or use the equity for further properties. Thank you, Gossip Girl, for that question. Appreciate it, and hopefully we'll get some more questions from you in the future. Hopefully that one helped you. And if you need help with becoming a property mogul, feel free to give us a call, and we'll give you a hand in starting your strategy and building your strategy and getting you to where you need to be. We have another question here from Samantha. Thoughts on buying in cheaper areas on the Central Coast, New South Wales? So this is a bit of a hard one to answer because it's based on individual goals, your financial situation, and a lot of other factors. In general, what we find is properties closer to the CBD, and this is over a lot of data research that we've looked at over the last 50, 100 years. What we find is that properties closer to the CBDs, whatever state you're in, and because they're employment hubs, because they're huge population hubs, because there's a lot of amenities, a lot of things that people want to be, a lot of things making people want to be in those areas, we're finding that they have better long-term results in terms of equity. Properties, those cheap areas in the Central Coast, they may be good for cash flow and yields, but they may have also slower equity increases. So it really depends on your strategy and what you're after. It's very hard to say without knowing at all your strategy or what's going on. But also something to consider is with the changing working environment that we're seeing at the moment due to COVID, that change in environment where people are working from home a lot, people don't have to go into the office, and we don't have to be in the CBD itself, and we can have smaller hubs outside. So like for example, in Sydney, you got Parramatta, which is, quite a big CBD itself, but also Liverpool, and then you got, Penrith, and you got your little suburbs, sub-towns, I guess, whatever you want to call them, that are quite big with a lot of amenities and whatnot, and people live in those areas, and they don't actually have to go into the city. So cheap areas in the Central Coast, obviously the Central Coast in New South Wales is very beautiful, along the beach, and like you mentioned, they are more affordable properties. And we may see a change where people actually are working from home permanently. They don't have to go into the office, and those properties may become more valued as people seek lifestyle changes. People move towards the bush or to the sea. But this may be a very slow change, and it really depends what's going to happen with COVID going on to next year. We'll get more information around that. People may get sick of it. People may want to go back into the office. So it's a bit of a slower change. And also infrastructure is very important for that kind of thing to happen, because even though people may want to be near the bush or the water, for it to have a large enough effect where you're getting growth and equity quicker, you're going to need, again, population numbers, because it's all about supply and demand. The more people you have going and the less supply, the more likely it will go up. The prices will structure there to meet the demand. The people won't come. So, but again, look, it may be good for your situation, but without knowing completely what the situation is, it is a bit hard to make a comment regarding that. But thank you for that question, Samantha. If you want to have a chat regarding your individual situation, feel free to give us a call, and we can go through that. And we got another question from Steve, who just said, thoughts on negative gearing. Not a small question, that one, Steve. Thoughts on negative gearing. So look, at First Brick, we're very pro on positive gearing as a strategy. And I'll make this clear, negative gearing is not a strategy. Negative gearing is a moment in time. It's a tax deduction. It's not a strategy. What negative gearing is, if people are not sure, negative gearing is when you essentially are losing money through your property, usually because your rent is lower than the mortgage that you're paying. So if my mortgage is $1,000 a month and my rent is $500 a month, I am negative $500 a month. Therefore, I am negative gearing. These losses are obviously a tax deduction because it's an investment property. But what that also means is, people use this as a strategy, but it's a bit of a flawed strategy, because what it means is I give you $2 and you give me $1. Yeah, I claim tax deduction because I'm losing money, but that's right, I'm losing money. For every time I give you $2, you give me $1, I'm always going to be worse off. You're going to be better off. And negative gearing, like I said, is a tax deduction. It's a moment in time, and it's when you have to be negatively geared, use it, take your tax deductions. But eventually, as you're paying down debt, your property will become positive. regardless. So if you buy a negatively geared property, or if you're buying in Sydney, chances are it's going to be negatively geared because the prices are so much higher than the rates of rent. But eventually, as you're paying down that debt or you're putting money into your offset account, the balance changes. It kind of flips, and then it becomes positive. And people get a bit upset when when they think, oh, now it's positive, I have to pay more tax. The way I like to ask to talk about the negative gearing versus positively geared debate is very easily, and I ask a lot of people this when we speak about it. I'm going to offer you two salaries for the same job. One's 100,000, one's 200,000. Which one would you prefer? No one's ever picked the 100,000. You're making more money at 200,000. You're going to pay more tax at 200,000, but you're going to go home with more money. Your what's in your pocket is going to be more than what's going to be in your pocket at 100,000, even though you're paying less tax at 100,000. So, positively gearing, that is a strategy. You're putting money in your pocket, and at the end of the day, we buy property to make money. It's just like if you started a business with your sole purpose of the business to lose money to get a tax deduction. It doesn't make sense. You don't run a business to lose money, just like we don't buy property to lose money. And now more than ever before, and we touched on this in a previous question from Gossip Girl, I think, now more than ever before, with property prices being so much higher than they used to, it is actually very difficult to have too many properties negatively geared and continue to be able to borrow money from the bank. Because the bank's going to look at it that you're losing money on property 1, you're losing money on property 2, and maybe you've got property 3 and losing money on property 3. You can't actually pay off. You can't afford property 4. You won't have the money. The bank will not allow you to borrow that money. So unless you got incredible amounts of income, you will need actually to look at your cash flow situation. And a lot of the times when you're negatively geared, you become very quickly capped. And a lot of people are finding that they're becoming capped quickly in terms of cash flow, and is inhibiting them to purchase property in the future. But thank you, Steve, for that question. I think pretty sure we did a episode solely based on positive versus negatively gearing earlier in the year. So if you flick through the podcast episodes, you'll be able to find that and check it out. We have a question from Layla, and again, we've got a few people joining in live. So if you guys have a question, this is a Q&A episode. It's our landmark episode 30, milestone episode. If you got a question, feel free to put it in the comments, and we'll try and get to it. We'll move on. In the meantime, we have a question from Layla. Will they scrap stamp duty, and what does that mean? Good question, Layla. So Layla's been watching the news and seeing the recent updates from the New South Wales budget that happened a few days ago. So if anyone's unsure what she's talking about and thinking, oh no, what's happening with stamp duty? I haven't heard about it. So this is something that's happening in New South Wales and was discussed and brought up in the budget, where they have said we are considering scrapping stamp duty and replacing it with an annual land tax, or an annual tax that's similar to a land tax. This isn't a decision that's already been made, the stamp duty decision. It's going to take a bit of time. It's going to go through a public consortium and a few other lines of questioning, and policies will be spoken about, and a lot of people are going to have a say on it. So we won't probably know what's actually going to happen until maybe March next year, if that. What happens if they scrap it? And what happens if they don't scrap it? And it's very hard to tell what we think will happen. Well, if they scrap it in terms of actually what will happen with the tax, they're suggesting that they replace the initial upfront stamp duty with a ongoing annual tax. How much that annual tax is going to be, we're not sure. Is it going to equal the amount that stamp duty would usually be? We're not sure. Nothing has been mentioned. I think if they swapped it for an annual tax, the annual tax will probably work out to be more than the stamp duty would, but because they're obviously collecting that over a much longer period of time, so they're going to increase what the overall tax would be. That's my guess, could be wrong. But stamp duty is the single largest source of revenue in the country from a tax point of view. It's very, very, very lucrative for the government. So for them to just scrap it and give us some sort of happy days solution, I doubt it. And for them to just scrap it very easily, I also doubt it. But what happens if they scrap it? what's going to happen to property prices? Some people are saying property prices might go down. Some people are saying property prices may go up. I personally think if stamp duty is scrapped, what we're going to see is property prices increasing. You might be thinking, well, why? We don't have to pay stamp duty, but all of a sudden you have $20,000 more that you would have spent on stamp duty to actually pay for property. You got more money, you're going to bid more, property prices are going to go up. That's just my opinion on what may or may not happen. But later, it's kind of a wait and see, and we'll see what happens. But more people with more money, more people competing for similar properties, interest rates at record lows. We're seeing record numbers of people applying for first-time mortgages or new mortgages or refinancing. So a lot of people are getting their money ready, and we'll be using that money, and we'll see what happens, and we'll see what that means moving forward. But thank you for that question, Layla. So we go to one more question I've got here, and we'll see if there's any questions in the comments. We've got a question from Anthony. How does an offset account work, and should I get one? Yes, you should get one. 100% get one. How does an offset account work? Again, I think we did actually have a full episode on offset accounts, but let's talk about it because it's really important and can save you so much money. And we've done also a whiteboard tutorial video on offset accounts and how they work. But let's discuss it. So what is an offset account? So when you have a loan, let's think about your loan as a bucket. You have your loan bucket. Say we purchase a property, 100% loan, so you have $500,000 as a loan, money you owe the bank. And what the bank does is they calculate interest on that loan. So your interest rate at the moment, interest rates are quite low, maybe it's 3%, 2.5%, whatever it is. Let's say 3%. What the bank does is every single day, the bank will do 500,000 times 3%, and that will give them the total amount of interest payable for the year. Divide that by 365 days. That's how much or 366, or however many days there are in the year. And that will tell the bank how much interest you owe for that particular day. And when they do that every single day, at the end of the month, they charge you, or at the end of the fortnight, or whatever your system is with your bank, let's say monthly, at the end of the month, they'll take whatever interest has accumulated over the 30 days, and they take it out of your account. Now, an offset account is an account that sits side by side to your loan. And what it does is it's in the name, it literally offsets whatever was in your loan with whatever is in your offset account. So your offset account is like your savings account. So if you get an offset account, your savings account, your debit account, whatever account you're using every day with all your money, that becomes your offset account. Your offset account, your salary, you put your salary into, your dividends, your rent, your side hustle, whatever kind of income you receive, you put it into your offset account. And what that does is it offsets the interest payable on the total loan. So for example, you've been working for a year, you've accumulated some money, you're saving well, whatever, and you've got $100,000 now, and that $100,000 is in your offset account. When the bank comes to check how much interest you have to pay, like we said, they're going to do 500,000 times the interest rate, 3%, divided by 365 days to find out how much you owe for this day. Now we've got an offset account, we've got some money in it. So what they're going to do is they're actually going to say, okay, let's pretend that the money in your offset account, you've used it to pay off your loan. So we've got 100,000 in your account, in your offset. Let's pretend that you've actually used that 100,000 to pay off 100,000 of your loan. So your loan was 500,000 and you have 100,000 in your offset. So we're going to pretend that your loan is only 400,000. 500 minus the 100, 400. So they're going to go 400,000 times 3% divided by 365 days is how much interest you owe for today. They do that every single day for the month. And then at the end of the month, they accumulate, they add it $30 a day, $20 a day, whatever it is. They accumulate end of the month, 2,000, 1,500, whatever that number is, and they charge you. Now, the benefit of an offset account obviously is reducing your interest, but interest is calculated every single day. So if you put 100,000 today and then tomorrow you get $1,000 transferred or $500 or whatever it is, your offset account goes up. Every single day your interest is calculated. So if your offset account today was 100 and then tomorrow is $100,200, it'll become 500,000 minus the 100,000 and $200 times 3% divided by 365 days will tell them how much interest you owe today. The other benefit of an offset account is you can use it whenever you want, just like your normal savings. You want to go buy groceries, you use your offset account. You get a normal card, just like your savings card or whatever card you use, and you go to the groceries, you buy some groceries. If you're going to the cinemas, you use your offset account as per normal. You want to buy a car, you can buy it because that cash is yours and it is available to use. That is the major difference of an offset account, for example, versus a redraw, where you're actually paying more money, you're putting more money into your loan to pay it down quicker, which is great, but you don't have access to that money. That money has actually been spent and you don't have access to it. If you want it, you're going to have to apply, get a line of credit, get the money back out, whatever it is. With your offset account, it's just there, simple, easy to use. Offset accounts can reduce the period, the interest that you pay by hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, a substantial amount of money, and all you have to do is set it up. There is literally no downside to an offset account. It is there. You're using your money daily basis anyway, and it's reducing the interest on your loan. Offset accounts are the greatest thing that happened in the property world. Now, if you want to get a little bit advanced, you want to get a credit card. And why do we want to get a credit card? Credit cards are bad, right? Why do we want to get a credit card? We use our credit card for our everyday purchases instead of using the offset. Because what happens when you go to the cinemas, your 100,000, you spend some money at the cinemas, your 100,000 has now become $99,950. And so when they calculate the interest for that day, it's gone down $50. Your offset's gone down $50. So when they calculate interest, it will be 500,000 minus $99,500. $99,950, sorry. If you haven't spent that 50, it's going to be 500,000 minus 100,000. So you're paying interest on less. So this is where your credit card can come into play. So when you go into the cinemas, use your credit card. When you go to buy the groceries, you can use your credit card. When you're buying your everyday goods, your $20 here, your $30 there, your $50 there, your $10 here, use your credit card. And that way your offset account is never decreasing during the week on day-to-day purchases. What you want to do at the end of the month, you pay off your credit card. You never ever miss a payment because interest rates on credit card are ridiculous, 20-30% sometimes, and you will get charged that per day. So you never want to miss your credit card repayments. If you do use a credit card, you have to be very, very strict with it, incredibly strict. You got to make sure you are paying it as you go. You can set up auto sweep functions, so once it's paid off, once the month comes, it's automatically paid from your account. The benefit of that is you're keeping more money in your offset account for the longest period of time. And then, at the end of the 30 days, money's going to come out of your offset to pay for the credit card, but you're also getting paid from your job, you're getting rent and whatnot, so your overall should be going up, hopefully. Anyway, that's when you're getting a little bit advanced. But how does an offset account work? As we mentioned, it sits side by side your loan. Whatever amount is in your offset is going to be deducted from the loan amount, and then they're going to work out the interest. So it can save you tens of thousands of dollars in interest. Anyone that doesn't have an offset account, call your bank, call your broker and sort it out today, because you're literally paying extra money for no reason, because that money's in your savings account anyway. Doesn't look like we have any more questions in the comments section. We've got no more questions from before as well. So we'll wrap it up. There you have it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to our first ever live episode on Instagram, IGTV, Instagram Live, whatever it's called. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. We've had listeners come in, jump in and out, and we've had a few comments, so which is great. A few thumbs up, a few waves. So hopefully there were no glitches. Hopefully there were no issues. I wasn't sure if the sound was working at the start, but I think Isabella gave us the thumbs up, so appreciate that. We will try and download this. I got to figure this out. I've never used it. Try and download this and upload it so everyone that listens to our regular podcast will be able to listen to it. So thank you again to those that watched, commented, and gave us thumbs up and whatnot. If you enjoyed it, let us know. We will do more of these. It's quite enjoyable for myself to see people tuning in as we're speaking. Maybe we'll get some guests to do a live with us if they're game enough. But let us know and we'll do more if you want more. Now, you can find all of our content. We mentioned a few different episodes today. You can find them on our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. Just search First Brick Property. If you haven't listened to our podcasts before, you can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Podcast Box, or whatever it's called. Every podcast player, we're pretty much on it. And if you have any topics you would like discussed, or if you have questions for our next Q&A, send us a message at hello@firstbrick.com.au, or shoot us a message on our social platforms. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review. Give us a 5-star, give us any kind of review. It really helps with getting us higher in the charts. Not long ago, we were, I think, just outside the top 100 in Australia, which is ridiculously crazy. It's fantastic, but we need more reviews, more comments. So on Apple Podcasts, on your podcast app, give us a 5-star, give us a review, comment, whatever it is. And pass the pod. If you know anyone that's interested in property, maybe someone's looking to purchase property, or they just love to talk about property, send them to our podcast. Every single person that you send is another viewer, and it's really amazing when we're seeing how many people are listening to our podcast. So pass the pod. Thank you so much again for everyone that joined in and has been listening in. Happy Friday. Enjoy the weekend. Incredibly hot here in Sydney, so hopefully you cool down. Buying property is our passion.